grateful and delighted to be here as a representative of a group of architects, writers, filmmakers, lawyers, artists that have formed a new kind of forensic agency. How come forensics? Isn't forensics the art of the state? Isn't what the police is supposed to do and does? The answer to this counterintuitive problem lies within our understanding of the challenges of our time. The combination of political, media, and technological realities that make the texture of our present. Much is made of the political insurgency against facts. It is manifested by organizations and politicians all around us. By the popular right that raises now its ugly face here in Europe. It is manifested by false claims against migrants. It is manifested sometimes when Russian spokespersons explain their actions abroad. It is manifested in Poland regarding the wartime history in the US and also in Britain. The attitude is not confined to this or other place, but it is one that is directed not against this or that matter of fact, not against this or that statement, but against the very possibility of establishing fact, that is, against the very process of verification. And thus, subjects such as evolution, climate change, historical facts of genocide, past and present, grave human rights violations, chlorine attacks in Syria become mere options, mere belief or opinions in the eyes of the beholder. The challenges of contemporary politics is that to deal with this new form of propaganda that is not like the propaganda of old. It is not a propaganda that aims to convince you of the merit of one ideological system rather than the other, but rather to blur people's conception of reality so that they should no longer know what to believe in. When a sense of reality is lost, darker forces could fill in the void and start manipulating. You've seen some of our work on Saidnaya with Amnesty International, a work that was corroborated by many witnesses and articulated in a report. And today, in this little presentation, I would have a place for our critics. Amnesty hired special effects to fabricate evidence. Of course, the people the evidence is manifested against will do everything that they can in order to render that false. Even Assad himself had to respond to our common investigation with Amnesty International.
The report that you have mentioned, it was a report made by Qatar and financed by Qatar. You don't know the source, you don't know the names of those victims, nothing verified about that report.
Everything was verified about it. However, it is obviously always more easy to attack those fact finders rather than engage with the facts, of course, themselves. And of course, and most painful for me personally as somebody born in Israel, is the reality of denial that takes shape in this place where I was born and grew up, and in this particularly in relation to the state of ongoing domination and occupation of Palestine. Above all is the negation of the Nakba, the Palestinian catastrophe that began in 1948 and is ongoing since, something which is denied in Israel by law and in practice. 4 years ago, forensic architecture exposed the killing by an Israeli sniper of 2 Palestinian teens protesting on Nakba Day, which was just celebrated or marked yesterday, the 15th of May. That was in 2014. That was denied. Our Minister of, at the time, our Minister of Defense, and by other officials, claiming that our evidence is doctored. And today, 4 years later, we faced with similar. This is an image from yesterday. Dozens and dozens more of unarmed Palestinian protesters being killed in the Gaza Strip. Here is a map from a completely other place. It's a map which is, for us, a working tool. where each one of those threads is a narrative map of the same event, an event relating to the disappearance of 43 students, Mexican students from the rural school of Ayotzinapa in Iguala, again in 2014. It is exactly that, the fact that no single narrative exists, the fact that even today, 4 years later in Mexico, the authorities would produce counter-narratives after counter-narratives of an event that should be simple and the parents should be connected again to the sons that they miss is very important to us. This is a fog. This image is a fog of complexity of a reality of post-factual politics. So we, cultural producers and practitioners, find ourselves in a counterintuitive position. Coming from left-wing politics, weren't we supposed to fight against established truth, against old normative frameworks? Now we find ourselves having to insist on international law, on the merit of expertise, on facts, and even on the most problematic notion of all, on the truth. But there is hope, because new evidence starts to proliferate through digital means that are used to the same digital means that are used to spread propaganda. They are also the means in which information is made public and could be gathered, verified, composed, and become a source for a counter-narrative. This kind of evidence is produced not from the single perspective of one all-knowing expert, but from the multiple dozens, hundreds, thousands perspective of different people on the ground, often the very people that are exposed to violence in the first place. A combination of multiple points of situated, lived knowledge. And here is an example of hundreds of videos that we've analyzed from the Gaza Strip and composed an analysis by looking very carefully at what people upload online, sending almost as messages in a bottle, in which and our necessity to sync up those images and to tell the story that comes not from any single video, but rather from a combination of all of them together. This is why, in our time, and as counterintuitive as it could be, organization like us must emerge. One of our model of constructing fact is using a static means of cultural producers. We look carefully at what is inscribed and registered in images and try to reconstruct scenes around them. This is an undisclosed detention and torture center in Cameroon, where we managed to expose the presence of American personnel right next to the buildings where violations are taking place, simply by tracking the Facebook accounts of American soldiers and locating them in space and time, showing them playing football or training each other right next to where Cameroonian detainees are being tortured. Again, showing a combination. Here is where the American soldiers are. These are detention sites and torture sites, simply by combining and using counter-surveillance, using the internet, not only to spy on us. Facebook is not only spying on us, but we can use it to look at the state. Here, together with Forensic Oceanography, a group led by Charles Heller and Lorenzo Pezzani, Forensic Architecture looked at misleading statement by the Italian judiciary claiming that this NGO boat that is removing a boat from which a successful rescue of African migrants has taken place in the Mediterranean, that they're colluding with migrants because they're dragging that boat back into Libyan coast in order to be used again. There is nothing in this image that can actually confirm or deny the direction. Well, not until you're looking at the direction of the waves and tracking them very systematically and comparing those, building a kind of a model of the water and comparing this with meteorological data from that day. So work together with meteorologists looking at the direction of the waves very carefully could show us the boat is being dragged away from the Libyan coast. This kind of work should not be necessary, but it is. Although we are not artists, we see ourselves as cultural practitioners operating within the cultural and art world, benefiting from and contributing to it. We use exhibition spaces as sometimes as alternative to court, as places from which we could actually expose facts. And of course here, the presentation that was mentioned before, the NSU case and the Andreas Temer himself having to look at our evidence again and counter now from Germany accusation of fake news and the like. So perhaps we must think of an aesthetic of facts similar to the one that emerged in Europe between the 16th and the 18th century, where facts were produced in a beautiful and complex entanglement between artists and scientists. So the challenge of our era is to re-establish the most important common, the ground of common perception of a world, a single world made out of multiple viewpoints, divergent and multivalented, but still a single world, one that is now polluted by the destruction of facts and false narrative. This common world is the ground for any politics. It is the meta-political condition on which all other political struggle would need to take place. Thank you.